2008 action thriller Wanted was a surprise hit, and no one could believe when it earned over $342 million worldwide. James McAvoy was the office drone turned assassin, Wesley Gibson, and the actor became an overnight sensation, and for good reason. The movie also starred industry veterans like Angelina Jolie, Morgan Freeman, and even Chris Pratt when he was still wearing his Hollywood newbie pants. The movie was loved by one and all, and with much success, a sequel seemed like a sure shot, and indeed, Universal was quick to begin developing Wanted 2. Yet here we are, well over nearly a couple of decades later, and Wanted 2 never saw the light of day. So what the heck happened? In this video, we'll be exploring what happened with Wanted 2. But before we begin, please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Those two small clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these marvelous videos. With that said, let's jump on in. Back when Wanted 2 was in active development, the creative team had big ideas for expanding Wesley's world. Rather than rehash the first film, the sequel would have opened up the Wanted universe far beyond the Chicago fraternity we saw in 2008. The story was set to jump ahead a few years and catch up with Wesley Gibson, now fully settled into life as an elite assassin. In Mark Millar's original comics, there are actually 5 assassin fraternities operating around the globe, but the first movie only introduced one. The sequel's script aimed to bring in the other 4 rival fraternities and turn Wanted into a globe-trotting saga of competing assassin clans. Speaking of the 5 fraternities, their leaders form what's called the Council of Five. It's composed of the leaders of the 5 different chapters of the fraternity, and they all meet once a year to vote on issues of importance. The 2 Americas are controlled by the Professor. Africa is under the purview of Adam 1, the world's oldest man who has outlived even his grandchildren. Then there's Mr. Rictus, who controls Australia. Europe belongs to this time-displaced Nazi called the Future. He's okay with joining hands with the Africans and the Asians as long as he can kill some Jews. Lastly, we have the Emperor, who is basically a Chinese crime lord who controls all of Asia, including the Indian subcontinent. In other words, Wesley wouldn't have been the only super hitman in town anymore in Wanted 2 and would have had to deal with a much larger and deadlier world of killers. To fill the void left by Angelina Jolie's character Fox, who didn't survive the first film, creator Mark Millar teased that Wanted 2 would introduce another cool new character in her place. Co-writer Derek Haas later revealed what that meant. According to him, the sequel would see Wesley mentoring a young female assassin, much like Fox mentored him, so you can assume this to be a similar relationship as the one between Mike and Harvey from Suits if you've watched that show. It's really good, you should watch it, but I digress. So Wesley, who is now experienced, would recruit a rookie with a life as miserable as his own used to be. In Haas's words, she's got a shitty life. He's sort of in the Fox role. This new girl is brought into the world. Essentially, Wesley would pay it forward, turning a downtrodden nobody into the next deadly protege. This new heroine would stand in for Fox, giving the sequel a fresh dynamic while honoring the original film's mentorship theme. Intriguingly, the writers also planned to change the original film's morality on its head. The first movie's credo was kill one, save 1,000, the idea that assassinating a single evil person could spare many innocent lives. Haas hinted that Wanted 2 would invert that mantra in some way. How exactly? Well, he kept that under wraps and only said that the sequel would turn the fraternity's philosophy upside down. We assume Wanted 2 would have explored a darker or more complex ethical twist. Director Timur Bekmambetov was equally coy, but promised Wanted 2 would come with a great twist of its own. It's the same character, same mythology, but a great twist, Bekmambetov teased, which basically meant that the follow-up wouldn't just be more of the same. Between the expanded assassin universe, a new protege character, and a subversive theme, everything that was needed for a good sequel was already there, and Wanted 2 had the potential to become something bigger and smarter than the original. Now, there are very few sequels that outsmart and outpower their original. More often than not, a movie fails to expand on the lore and ends up repeating the original's formula. I mean, how many great sequels can you name off the top of your head? I think apart from a few notable exceptions like The Dark Knight, sequels are usually worse than the original. Prove us wrong in the comments, but anyways, the point is, Wanted 2 had the potential to become a Dark Knight. If all those ideas sound pretty exciting, you're not alone in thinking so. So why did Wanted 2 crash and burn in development hell? In short, a perfect storm of behind-the-scenes trouble stopped this sequel in its tracks. One major issue was creative differences. Michael Brandt and Derek Haas, who were the writers of Wanted, did a sequel script that Universal initially liked, and Bekmambetov was interested in returning to direct. However, Bekmambetov soon had a very different vision for the project than what the writers proposed. He pitched some drastic changes, an out-of-the-box direction that the studio wasn't confident about. In Brandt's words, he had kind of a different idea for what he wanted to do. 2. He suggested some changes, and it kinda took the wind out of the sails of the studio. The momentum behind Wanted 2 suddenly evaporated. The team had a script they were proud of, but hearing the director toss out a wild new approach made the studio second-guess the whole thing. In the aftermath, this internal tug-of-war over the sequel's direction left the project stuck in limbo like so many other planned sequels. Compounding the problem was studio turnover and fading momentum. You see, Hollywood studios don't stay the way they are for long. Executives come and go, priorities change, and a project can get lost in the shuffle if it doesn't move fast. During that time, Universal's leadership turned fast and furious as new tentpole movies took center stage, and Wanted 2 was left behind. What energy there was in 2009 and 2010 had largely fizzled by the mid-2010s. In other words, Wanted 2 missed its window. With each passing year, it became harder to rekindle interest in a sequel to a now-aging one-off hit, especially without a unified creative vision to champion it. Perhaps the biggest roadblock of all was Angelina Jolie's death in the movie. Jolie was the marquee star of Wanted, and her character Fox was hugely popular, so much so that early on, the studio explored ways to somehow bring Fox back for the sequel, despite her clearly dying in the first movie. Jolie, however, wanted no part of that. In fact, she had been the one to insist Fox must die in the original's ending because she felt it was true to the character once Fox learns the fraternity had betrayed its own code. When Universal floated the idea of resurrecting Fox, Jolie said, "If I die in a movie, I should die," meaning she doesn't believe in cheap reversals. Besides, around that time, Jolie had just led another spy thriller called Salt and felt that doing Wanted 2 would be the exact same thing in another movie, which wasn't something she found interesting. Her refusal to return and the fact that Fox's death had to stick forced the writers to go back to the drawing board. The loss of Jolie's star power was a serious blow. Without Fox, the sequel needed a whole new hook, hence the new trainee character, but it also meant giving up the easy marketing win of Jolie's presence, and that was a tall order. On top of that, the creative team themselves struggled to crack the Wanted 2 story once Jolie was gone. The first film had wrapped up pretty definitively. Wesley literally killed every member of his assassin fraternity. Where to go from there? Mark Miller admitted that after the comics material was exhausted, they simply didn't have ideas for the next chapter. Miller recalled a producer asking what the plan was for Wanted 2, and his blunt response was, "I don't have any ideas." In hindsight, it seems the sequel's concept was always a bit nebulous, getting reinvented multiple times. First, they wanted to resurrect Fox, then the whole new protege thing, and then global fraternities would also have been a gamble if they could not match the scope of such a grand scale of things without ever finalizing a finished script that everyone loved. Meanwhile, Timur Bekmambetov's attention also moved elsewhere. With Wanted 2 stalled, he moved on to other projects like directing Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter in 2012 and Ben-Hur in 2016 instead of a Wanted sequel. Years later, Bekmambetov came back with an even more radical idea for Wanted 2. By 2020, he proposed transforming the sequel into a screen-life film by ditching traditional cameras for a story told entirely through computer screens and digital devices. In this version, the modern fraternity wouldn't be running around with guns at all. I cannot imagine an assassin in today's world would run with a gun. He will use drones. He will use computer technology, is what Bekmambetov said. The concept was to bring Wanted into the age of hackers, blockchain, and the dark web. You don't need to bend bullets anymore. You need to bend ideas, he added, and meant that high-tech warfare would replace curving gunshots. It was an innovative opinion, we agree, but such stuff wouldn't sell. No way. And let's be honest, it was way too innovative for Universal or any other production house, which would never agree with said pitch. Bekmambetov's experimental streak may have further alienated the studio from the project as it veered far from the crowd-pleasing style that made the original a hit. In the end, all these factors combined to sink Wanted 2 into development purgatory. So is there any hope left for Wanted 2? Well, as of 2025, the sequel remains where it was a decade ago, in development limbo. Universal Pictures has made no moves to revive it, and no production is on the horizon. However, the people who helped make Wanted haven't completely given up. In fact, multiple completed scripts for Wanted 2 exist, sitting on the shelf waiting for a champion. Michael Brandt and Derek Haas have confirmed that they finished a script years ago, one they still believe in. "We wrote a script for it that I still think is pretty good," Haas said recently. He even issued a friendly call-out to James McAvoy. "James McAvoy, come on back. Let's do Wesley again." It's clear the original writers would love to see Wesley Gibson ride again, and they're not alone. McAvoy himself has expressed willingness to reprise the role. He's stayed busy with other franchises and movies, but when asked about Wanted, McAvoy said he'd always fancied seeing what happened to Wesley after the first film. The interest from the creative side is there, trailer, script in hand, star on board, if only the studio gave the go-ahead. For now though, Universal hasn't greenlit anything. Wanted 2 remains officially inactive, stuck in that infamous development hell despite the occasional burst of chatter. Derek Haas remains cautiously optimistic. Never say never in this town, that's for sure, he noted, implying that under the right circumstances, a long-dormant project can still spring back to life. And it's true, Hollywood loves a comeback. But with each passing year, we're now 17 years out from the original film, the odds of Wanted 2 ever happening grow slimmer. The case of Wanted 2 is almost a textbook example of how even a blockbuster hit can fail to spawn a sequel when fate doesn't cooperate. The original film had the money and the fan base behind it, but that wasn't enough to overcome creative roadblocks and talent losses. Financial success doesn't guarantee a part 2, especially when your lead actress opts out and your director's ideas diverge wildly from the script. In the end, Wanted 2 will remain a typical what-if thing for several more years until it gets the status of a movie from the ancient past, and that's when it might see a sequel, spin-off, or reboot, much like what's happening with so many other movies these days. All the ingredients for a terrific sequel already exist. We have a larger assassin world, a new protege, but realistically, we might not see it come to light, at least not anytime soon. Wesley Gibson taught us in Wanted that you can curve a bullet to change its path. Unfortunately, curving a Hollywood production's path is a lot harder. Despite the creator's enduring hope, Wanted 2 looks stuck off target, a victim of its own behind-the-scenes fate. It's a fun thought experiment to imagine what could have been, but unless something drastic changes, Wesley's return will remain the stuff of fantasy. Sometimes, even for a killer assassin with impossibly good aim, the sequel just isn't in the cards. Unfortunately, that's all we have for you this time, guys, but we'll see you in the next one. Oh, and if you want another WTF video on a certain topic or franchise, let us know in the comments. We're always looking for ideas for new videos.